Today, my guest is Emily Haswell, writer and TikToker, and I invited her on because she created a video that I absolutely love, and it fit right in with our current theme. So, as you know, we're talking about gender, we're talking about society, we're talking about all aspects of it. We've been talking to people who are trans, non-binary, we've been talking about not all men. And there is something that comes up time and time again when me and my friends have conversations about gender and about double standards. Why, oh, why do old famous men love young women? I think there's lots of things about it that seem obvious. And we know it happens outside of, fame. But I saw this TikTok and it couldn't have come at a better time because it was right after I'd had a conversation with one of my friends about this. So, Emily, welcome to Speak On. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
So, you did an ode to old dudes who date teen girls, and it's in there's quite a few parts, and every single part made me laugh. Okay, what was your inspiration for that? There has to have been something you saw and you were just like, what the hell is happening here? Tell me.
Yeah, so I'll tell you exactly what my inspiration was. My inspiration was John Mayer, who was being a douchebag on TikTok, because he dated Taylor Swift when he was like 35 and she was like 19. I'm not sure the exact ages. It's on the video, but something like that. Something that's not illegal, but makes you go, oh, why is that happening? And so she, at the time wrote a song about how he was just kind of a crummy partner. I also read about his relationship with Jessica Simpson. He just seems like an all around real shitty boyfriend and just crappy dude in general. And so he put out this TikTok. He made a TikTok, and he made this TikTok basically like making fun of Taylor Swift, saying like, POV, you're complaining to me and I'm just letting you talk or whatever, just something like that. And so that made me want to kind of call him out and call out all dudes that date much younger women and then have the audacity to like complain about them.
Yes.
Which is just so
Which
insane.
is wild. Yeah.
Yeah, like you were dating a teenage girl and you broke up and then she got upset about it. What did you think was going to happen? You were the adult in the situation, babe. Like what? So that was my inspiration. And then I went on, and like you said, there were a lot of parts because it is truly endless. I mean, you could make so many parts to this. Unfortunately, like through my research for this, which I wrote this with my fiance, and there were so many people that we didn't know about, where it's such a bummer because it's people that are so beloved. Like, it's not just the John Mayers of the world. Sorry if you loved him. We all did back in the day, but but there's so many, like David Bowie, Prince, Jerry Seinfeld, and it's just like, and like you said, it's not just celebrities. It's obviously something that happens a lot in real life as well.
But we know that famous men and people with money are going to have access to a lot more girls, which sounds gross.
It's so gross. It's so gross. And so I just kind of wanted to make a couple songs about that because I hate that. And it's I mean, also I wanted to be funny, but I also like, this is something that makes me angry. I mean, I want to say like, I'm not an expert, like I didn't study this or anything like that, like, but it's just something that I think a lot of people notice and creeps us out.
And it's weird, isn't it? Like how normalized so much of that is. There is this kind of, there are multiple kind of levels within that dynamic, let's say, that are normalized. I feel like when these relationships last, people then completely forget the predatory nature of how it started, like Celine Dion and her husband. Or like Matthew McConaughey and his wife. I mean, I know I think she was like 20 or something at the time, but he met her earlier when she was a teenager. And
well, they point to that and they go, well, see, it's all working out, which I had a lot of that in the comments of my TikTok videos. So many women commenting saying, I met my husband when I was 19 and he was 40 and we love each other. We have children.
That's because he's groomed you, hun.
Yeah.
He's groomed you into loving him. I don't know.
Yes. I mean, that's totally, that's what I feel. And, I mean, obviously there are like subtleties in every relationship, right? Like I don't think necessarily every man that does this, and it's not just men, but come on, it's mostly men. Because who would want to hang out with a teenage boy? It's the worst. But they might not necessarily think to themselves, like, I'm doing something evil. They're not twisting their mustache and being like, I got him now, but there is something to be said about, like, why is it that you can't connect with women your own age?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I think most of the time when women start dating men that are much older than them, when they reach the age that they were when they started dating, they look around and they go, oh, what was why what was going on, what's going on? So I think it's very easy when you're still young to say, I met this much older man and it's all great and good, but I think eventually you're going to look around and go, this something isn't quite right, like,
Yeah.
why is this going on? So I don't know, and I'm sure there are 100 million exceptions to that rule, and people are
Yeah.
going to say I have a lovely relationship, but I think for the most part there's something wrong with the older person that's making that decision
Yeah.
to date someone so much younger than them.
Yeah, there is this kind of level of predatory behavior. And like the reason what this was, I mean, truly, I saw your TikTok and I'd had a conversation maybe like 2 days beforehand with, I spoke to the producer Abby and a few other people. And in the past, we brought it up as well. And we talked about, I've always flagged up these big age gaps, and not age gaps after a certain age, like truly after you're 25, do what you like. Your brain has finished forming, do what you like. Underneath that, I feel, because this is really dodgy. If you're a teenager, what the fuck are you doing? Sorry,
I totally agree. I totally agree.
It's so crazy. And then I think, I mean, this maybe this is the case for you as well. Does everyone have that one or a few friends from school who always dated an older guy? Like, does everyone have that? Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I was younger, like when I was 17 years old, I had a 4-year relationship where the guy that I met was 21.
Yeah.
And like, that's not as extreme as the examples that we talk about, but there was still, even that, there was a power dynamic that was not healthy.
Yeah.
And I've had friends that have done it. And like, at the time, I think when you're young and if you're seeking stability, which I'm not saying that as a judgment, I think we're all seeking stability, especially when we're young. It's all very, it feels so good to have somebody that is older and knows what they're doing and can take care of you and can fill that parent role. But I mean, as you get older, you look around, you go, oh, that's creepy. But it's just not something that, as a group of 20-year-old girls, I think for the most part, if their friend starts dating someone that's 35, they're going to go, oh, great. So like he can take us out to dinner. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and I'm sure there's much more insightful 20-year-olds than I was at the time. But I just think that you also feel like a grown-up. You are a grown-up, right? You feel very grown. You're like, I'm a serious person. I'm a smart person. It's not a judgment on any 20-year-old girl's intelligence, 19-year-old girl's intelligence. It's just about getting to that older age and looking backwards and going, oh, there was something wrong with them, and you just can't feel that until you get there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think when my parents are quite young, they had me when they were both teenagers, and so that I found that with my friends where the age gap between us and our parents is quite low, it's quite small. We date guys our own age. We're not really dating guys that are older, because otherwise, like, you're veering into your parents' territory a bit, which is like a bit yuck. So I feel that's a thing that's kept me and my friends. And I remember having these conversations in school, and there were two, I say girls because at the time we were children, two girls in particular, and they both used to always date older guys. Now, one of them looked older. She was, there's that girl in school that's taller, her boobs are bigger. Truly, if you in a school uniform, she looked out of place. If you put her in adult clothes, she looks like an adult. So you can understand why an adult man would hit on her. But what came out of her mouth is what comes out of a child's mouth. And then there was another girl that she was really small, really petite, and she looked younger. So it was kind of even more icky. And I remember my friend Libby at the time just said to her, she was like, Katie, don't you think that your boyfriend might just be a paedophile, but you've just fallen into the thing where it's just acceptable because you just turned 16. So it's like, because you look younger, and what you say is obviously what a kid would say, but luckily he's just about on the right side of the law. And then we all looked and we were like, I mean, where's the lie? It's so kind of weird.
It is. And what's unfortunate is that, I mean, I think that the men that do this need therapy, right? Like if you're dating women that much younger than you, like something's gone wrong, you need to go ahead, get that all worked out, talk to some women your own age. But so unfortunately, like most social issues. It falls to women to kind of like figure that out for themselves. Like, I think what I would love to see happen is for young women to, instead of like glamorizing having a relationship with an older man, to sit around with their friends and go, oh, what?
This is
Gross.
weird.
Why does he want to be with me? But it's so hard to get there. You know, I mean, it's difficult. And like, I'm glad that you and your friends, like your friend was like, don't you think he's just a pedophile? Like, I love that. I feel like most young women, at least when I was a teenager, was like, ooh, it's so sexy and cool to be dating somebody that's older. And like, if we can get rid of that myth, then I think that would help so much. It's not fair. It's not fair that it falls on the children in the situation.
Yeah.
You have to look around and go, I don't think I want to date this adult, but I don't trust the 35-year-old men that are dating 19-year-olds. I don't trust them to have a metamorphosis and go, this is wrong. I'm going to seek help. Because if it's not wrong in the eyes of the law, they just go,
whatever.
Well, that's fine. But the thing I always come back to when I talk to women that are dating much older men is I say, what do you guys talk about?
Yeah.
What do you talk about? Like, I just don't understand. Like, so my fiance is 37. I'm 31. We met when I was 26, right? So like totally like within like all good and everything like that. Plenty to talk about. We have all the same cultural touchstones, right? Like we can look back and say like, yes, this is what it was like growing up, all that good stuff. But when you have somebody that just had a completely different experience than you as a teenager, as a child, what do you talk about? What TV shows do you watch after a long day? Like, I think that there's something there that's really icky. And also like you're in love with the idea of being with an older man more than you're in love with the actual relationship, because I can't imagine that you're having like stimulating conversation. I just can't.
It's such a weird one, because even when I've been dating, if someone's a bit older than me, I feel that I don't know why, because I suppose I'm 39, so it's that bit where I just still a millennial. I'm just right at the beginning of it. And I find that if I speak to someone above that, I'm like, if they don't know who, I don't know, Chrissy Teigen or John Legend, I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yes,
There were just such
exactly.
weird, that cultural touch kind of point thing. You're like, oh yeah, actually you can feel the gap. So I can't imagine what that must be like.
Totally. I don't want to spend my time like I'm at Thanksgiving explaining to my uncle like a meme or something. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not my like idea of a fun relationship. And I think that, again, I'm sure that someone that is a psychologist could be like, this is exactly the reason that these things happen. These are the reasons that younger people want to fill these roles. These are the reasons that older people want to fill these roles. And I'm sure they would tell us it's not healthy. But I really can't quite understand it. And I think that I was talking last night to my fiance about the whole James Franco thing, where James Franco has been canceled now because he was caught messaging, and I don't know if it went further than that, like teenage girls, 17-year-old girls.
And hasn't this been happening for a while? But no
sure
one's really,
it's like one of those things where it's like, you have to have
know
12,
that James Franco's like this.
Yeah, you have to have like 12 young women be victimized before we finally take it seriously, which is just like a tragedy within itself. But so we were talking about that, and I was saying, what I don't understand, specifically when it happens in the world of like movie stars and music stars and all that stuff, is if your goal is to feel like you have power over someone, or if your goal is to feel like the leader in the relationship, then I don't understand why these people that are millionaires have to date people that, I mean, it's illegal for James Franco to date a 17-year-old here. Like that's illegal. And so I don't understand why, if he dated a 25-year-old, he's going to have power over them because he's a millionaire. He's been in movies. He goes, do you know what I mean? So what is it that they need someone that's a literal child? Like, why is that? And why, I just don't understand. Like, I think it must come from a place of insecurity. It must come from a place of wanting to be with someone that is never going to question you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's like a whole power, like you're saying, it's a whole power dynamic thing. It's kind of grooming, but also is it because there's an element of, we infantilize men slightly? Like there is psychologists have found that from about the age of like between like 10 and 13, an empathy gap grows between boys and girls. And then it just gets bigger, and that's how we kind of end up in these, as you know, as many women do, in these things where men are basically just being abusive or, sexually harassing you and everything else, and they think it's all bounce, and they think it's all kind of play, and it's not. There is, I don't know, is there a kind of a thing where it's like, well, because women are more mature than men, because we are adultified, essentially, we are kind of subject to adultification from a really young age, so then everything becomes our responsibility as women, and they put a lot of responsibility on us even when we're children. It's like they call them young women, and it's not, this is a child. But in the press they'll call them young women. But with guys it's like, well, what can you expect from guys? That's
boys
just
will be
guys.
boys.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They're so immature. Yeah,
I think that's such a good point. And I think it's so toxic when we say like women mature faster than men, because that may totally be true. But yeah, it does make young women think like, well, then it makes sense that this older man wants to be with me because I'm so mature. And it's not about that. Like, it's not about how mature you are or about how intelligent you are or worldly or whatever. It's about like, this person has had more life experiences than you. They have, because they've lived 15, 20 years longer, or whatever it may be. And there's no amount of intelligence that can replace that. And they just, even if they're not trying to be manipulative, they're going to inform your worldview in ways that are irreputable. And it's not fair. Like, it's not right for someone to swoop in before. I mean, when I think about myself at 18, 19, I was not a critical thinker. I hadn't had formed any of the opinions that I have today really yet. And if someone had come along much older and said, here's how you need to think, and I love you and you're the best, I would have been like, great, this person is probably right. And like, I think that's what's most hazardous about it, is that you just, and again, lots of 18-year-olds are different than I was, but I think that you can just come in and fill somebody's head with something, and that is the most important person in your world. Like, this person that you're dating that tells you, I love you, I want a future with you, you're going to believe and trust them. And I think it's really harmful to say, oh, this is a young woman. Like, no, this is a child. She should be treated as such. And I totally agree. I think it's very weird and icky. And but it's so ingrained in our culture to be like, women are only valuable when they're a certain age. Like, by the time a woman turns 25, she's too old for Leonardo DiCaprio to star in a movie with.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Or to date in real life.
Yeah.
So there's also this kind of feeling of a ticking clock, which is so insane, because 25 is still so young. So young. But there's like this feeling of you're most beautiful, you're most shiny, you're most charming between the ages of like 18 and 22. And it's just so
which is
harmful.
wild, because I'll be honest, I look better now than I did when I was younger, if it's on that stupid metric as well. And it's like, everything about you is better when you're older. And like you were saying, the opinions you formed, how you think, everything, the things you've learned about yourself, how you conduct yourself, everything, because of that. It's so crazy. And I think, the whole women or girls being more mature than boys, so much of that is because we are made to be. We most really wouldn't actually be if we weren't socialized differently at a certain age. If women are, girls are held more accountable for their actions than boys are, which allows them to stay in a state of arrested development for longer, not taking responsibility and just wandering around, just bumbling into things and knocking stuff down with impunity. I think that all contributes to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And as I'm the oldest daughter, I have two younger brothers, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that like the things that like are expected of me and were expected of me when I was younger were just very different and very, I mean, I can remember when I was like a teenager, sitting in our living room with my brothers watching like an Adam Sandler movie, something goofy, right? And my mom would walk in and say, oh, Emily, do you like this? You know what I mean? Like, do you like this like goofy comedy? And me feeling like, oh, this is kid stuff, I'm not supposed to like this. Whereas like for boys, it's like, oh, yep, that's just boys will be boys. Not that that's a very harmful example, but I think it kind of showcases like the way that we think about 15-year-old girls versus 15-year-old boys.
Yeah, Exactly, yeah. It's like the difference between boys liking fart jokes and things. It's like, I like fart jokes too, it's fine. But yeah,
yeah. You're just meant to you're just meant to be a little adult, I think, much younger
yeah.
when you're a young woman.
Mm.
And it definitely helps to make it so that you are going to date older men, because you're kind of groomed by society, if you will,
Yeah.
into thinking like 16, you're, you're innocent, but you're also
Ready for
ready
these
for the
things.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just yeah, I don't know. It's complicated, isn't it? Right? Because 16-year-old girls are also kind of held up as this like virginal archetype of like this perfect blank palette for you to draw on.
Mm-hmm.
And but you're also thought of as an adult. So I think we're kind of playing a lot of roles at that age.
Yeah.
And depending on who we're around, we're kind of taught to fill in how we're supposed to act versus with our parents. Some older guy is talking to us, it's all very, we kind of taught to be little performers. I feel like.
Yes. Yeah. That's such a good point. Such a good point. When you were kind of looking into the different ages, and I actually was looking through the videos earlier, trying to work out what was the most shocking age gap, or what was the most shocking, I suppose, pairing. Like, for example, I didn't realize until I saw your video that Jerry Seinfeld met his wife.
Oh, so Jerry
Wow.
Seinfeld is like my favorite. Like, if I have too many drinks at a party, I'm like,
Yeah.
come here, let me tell you about Jerry Seinfeld, because like it makes me so angry, because I grew up with Jerry Seinfeld. I loved Seinfeld, my dad, all that stuff. And he's kind of heralded as like America's sweetheart kind of guy. And what the fuck was going on that Jerry Seinfeld, when he was at the height of his fame, and he was, I cannot remember the exact ages, but the girl was 16 or 17. He was 36 or 37. He was walking through Central Park and met a teenage girl and started dating him started dating her while he had like the biggest show on TV.
And no one said
what?
anything.
And
That's
everybody was like,
wild.
Cool. And you know what else I think is so interesting about that is that the actress that played Elaine on that show, I'm trying to remember her name right now. She's very
Julia
famous.
Louis-Dreyfus.
Yes.
Yeah.
She, like, at the time, I think someone asked her what she felt about it, right? Because you can have female friends as like a cover. Yeah. And she was like, oh, it's great. We threw her birthday party. Great. So it's like, I'm not blaming her at all, but I just think it's interesting that people will just look to a woman closest to a man and go, do you think this is creepy? And if they say, nope, this is fine. Like he was her boss. What was she gonna say?
What was she gonna say? This is disgusting and I hate it, and then lose her job?
I think it's weird. Yeah. No, of course not. But yeah, I just hate that. I think that I think it's insane that he's still so popular and we just like don't talk about that.
Yeah.
That really bothers me. I don't remember the exact ages, but the two that I remember being like, oh no, is Prince and David Bowie. Yeah. So obviously I always thought super highly of both of them. And they were both, David Bowie, it was like a groupie, this girl that apparently was like with a lot of famous musicians at the time, which like doesn't change the fact that she is 15 years old.
Yeah, she is a child, and they all used her.
Child. Yeah. Insane. And then Prince, I think she was like 16 or something.
Oh, wasn't that the dancer that he ended up marrying?
Yes.
Yeah, I never realized how young she was.
So young, and like
Jesus.
And again, I think that kind of speaks to your point earlier about how like because they were married and everything, like people were like, well, this legitimizes it. But like, no, that's still really strange. And there was some interview where she said, or a friend said, or someone said, yeah, like he told her like, we're not allowed to sleep together until like you're a certain age. And I'm like, but that's
so why did he go? Why was he with her then?
I mean, great. Yeah. You're a hero for not doing that, I guess. Yeah. But like, I still think it's so creepy that he was like, not yet, honey. Like,
well, because it's because in your head you're like, oh god, he's picturing it though, and she's still the baby. Well, yeah.
And he's obviously like there, and I mean, who knows if that's even true or if that was some cover story? I don't know, but nonetheless, I think it's just a really creepy position to be in, where you go, okay, sweetie pie, don't worry, we're gonna have sex in a few years when I decide you're ready.
Yeah,
and I'll be your sexual partner. Get me out of here. What? So yeah, I think the reason that people don't want to look into it is because there are so many heroes of the world that you'll look at and go, oh no, what were they doing? Like,
Mm.
it's just yeah. So I think Prince and David Bowie were the ones that I had no idea about,
Yeah.
and that I was like really shocked and upset to find that out. um a lot of other people, like I knew about Jerry Seinfeld, that one always made me really bad. Obviously, like there's a chart you can find online of
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio does not date anyone over the age of 25, which is
Which
like
is
insane.
insane. But of course, we have to praise him though, because his dedication to the environment, he is making the world safer for his future girlfriend or future wife when she finishes school
Yes,
in 12
exactly.
to
Like
25 years. Yeah.
he's making sure all the children that he dates will have
Hmm.
a beautiful world to grow up in. And isn't that
Exactly.
something?
I know, just the
Yeah,
kindness of the man.
I know. I mean, he seems like he would be horrible to have a conversation with, truly. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that where it's people that take up these great causes, these other
Hmm.
important causes, but you're like, okay, but what are you doing with those little girls? Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? It's just, and of course, 25 is not a little girl, and like
Hmm.
Leonardo DiCaprio is not the worst case. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't date people that are, I mean, I'm sure he's dated teenagers,
Yeah.
but whatever. But
It's the fact
it's,
that he's traded in them in. I think that's where it kind of becomes more problematic, doesn't it? That
yeah, yeah.
everyone stays, he gets older, but his girlfriends stay young. So it's like some kind of weird Dorian Gray-esque thing.
Yes.
If the portrait was a person, she wasn't.
Yes,
It's
and
so
I think
weird.
but it's perpetuated so much through Hollywood too, where
Mm,
it's it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. But if
mm.
you look at movies and TV shows, and then you look at the ages of like two co-stars, like a man and a woman,
Yes,
the
always,
man is always
always so
so
much older.
older, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh, yep, this is fine. Like
yeah,
Zoe Deschanel and Jim Carrey, sure, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, I think that it is so normalized, and we're just like, men are just fun big man children, and
mm.
women are here to be their
Rein them
manic
in.
pixie dream girls that
Mhm.
teach them how to live again. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
literally.
Yeah, like they're just props to cure them of their old man depression. And like,
Exactly.
yeah, it's so normalized. And so I think that that's part of it too, is that it's just like, yeah, that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
And I am not a fan.
Yeah. I love that you made the point about the manic pixie dream girl, because truly that trope is what is propping up men when their testosterone goes over a cliff at a certain age. Because that's, I mean,
Totally.
genuinely, I had we recorded a pod recently talking about hormones, and something we don't talk about in men is that they do have almost like have a menopause type situation going on.
Hmm.
But yeah, but it's like literally then it's like then their hormones go off and they're like, I must find a younger lady. Like
Yeah, like this will
literally.
prove that I'm still young, and it
Yeah.
only serves to make you look older. Like if
That's
you walk around
that's
with a very
it.
young woman, it's just putting a spotlight on you. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
truly.
Truly. I remember one of my mates he dated was when this was God years ago now. He dated someone that was super young. And
Hmm.
I mean, I was like, dude, why? That was my first thing. I was like, why? It's like, I get it. She's pretty, she's young, great. Her tits are where they are. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, but why? And oh, she's so nice, she's so lovely. And then he then was in some weird war with his ex-girlfriend. I was gonna love me for saying this, but online. And I remember commenting, and he made something about I remember I made a point. I was like, dude, we can't help getting older. And he laughed, and I was like, mate, I'm talking about you.
Yeah.
He laughed, thinking I was being like a bitter woman saying
Yeah.
about aging. It's like, no, I look 15 years younger. You look your age, and she looks like a child. You were just going to keep aging, and she looks younger than she was anyway. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm referring to your aging, because he took himself out of that scenario to
Oh
laugh
yeah, because
at women
men's
older.
age
Yeah,
is no problem. They
yeah,
can just keep having babies with these little girls.
yeah. And they just don't even think about the fact that it's like, do you think you're going to look like this forever? Because you're not.
No,
It's so
no.
strange. I mean,
Well, it's
without
just because
surgery.
there's no tax on men to look young forever, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they're not meant to be like, men get older and we say, oh, he looks so distinguished,
Mm,
because like that's not the role of men to look like. And like, ugh, there's so many female beauty standards that are just about looking like a little girl. Like,
yeah.
it's so creepy. Like, you need to be hairless, and
Hmm.
you need to have this like porcelain skin, and you need to be very, very thin, like
Mhm.
being very, like all these things that come naturally to a prepubescent girl.
Yeah.
And like that is not the beauty standard for men at all. The beauty standards for men are all about like being able to grow a lot of hair and have a lot of
Yes.
muscle
Yeah.
and look like an adult. And so
Yeah.
it's like I said, it's just so ingrained. It's just, yeah, if you look around, there's signs everywhere. But I think it's interesting too. You're talking about your friend describing like his new young girlfriend, saying like, she's so nice, she's so sweet, she's so this. Like, I think that's such a such a big part of it, is that like it's so much easier to date a young woman because
Mhm.
they are like, they haven't formed thoughts and ideas that they're going to challenge you on yet. They're going
Yeah.
to listen to you and they're going to go, wow, that's such a smart thing you've just said, as
Yes. Yeah.
opposed to, well, actually, like I have this political opinion, or I have this opinion, this and that. And or like they don't get cranky as often because the world hasn't kicked their butts yet or whatever. But I think that there's also this thing of like just not being challenged at all in your relationship, which is not something you should want. If
Mm.
you should want a relationship that like challenges you to be a better person. Both people should.
Yeah.
And like if you want something that's just easy like that, get a pet, get a dog, get a cat. But you don't need to bring another person into that scenario.
Absolutely. It's like there's clearly something going on that they haven't spotted. And again, we know that there are, like you said throughout, there are nuances to this.
Sure.
There are people that are going to meet people and they're going to connect and then they are right for each other, etc. But
Sure.
the broad strokes, broad spectrum of this is men having, there is a problem here.
Yes.
There is a problem here. And it's that, and pursuing children is not gonna fix that. And like and saying, I think we need to keep saying children as
Yeah.
well, because in the press, when these age gap relationships are happening, and obviously the press generally, they are adults, the adultification of women and the adultification of children happens all the time.
Yeah.
16, you're a young woman, you're not a woman, they're still a child, that is
Yeah.
a teenager, that is somebody's child. Like yesterday, if it was the day before and you were talking about it, you would have called her a child. So nothing's changed now. It's
Nothing.
so it's such an interesting one, and I wonder if things will start to change. So particularly with things like, obviously social media has opened up everything, and it's
Hmm.
opened up, the brilliant thing about it, it's opened up conversation, it's opened up what it has done for like feminism and the liberation of women, is allowing all these younger women to get into feminism, being introduced to feminism way earlier, and
Yes,
the
totally.
concepts of it. And I wonder if there'll be a point where they start to say, go away, old man, with your old balls. Do you think that
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, I think, what has to happen. Like I said, unfortunately, it's yet again going to fall on the shoulders of young women to
Mhm.
protect themselves versus to have these predators have some kind of awakening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the best things about social media and about TikTok and all these things is that it's given a chance for young women to talk to each other, to talk to
Mhm.
older women and go, oh, this is not normal, and not kind of live in a bubble of other 16-year-old girls who are going to say, yeah, I think this is great, your old
Mhm.
boyfriend seems cool, whatever, whatever. So yeah, I think the more that women talk to each other and go, this is my experience, because it's, look, most moms are going to say, ooh, no, you
Yeah.
cannot date this adult man,
Unless
which
you're
when you're
Courtney Stodden's
16.
mum, but carry on.
Oh God, what
She
a
don't give
nightmare
a
that
shit.
is.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
like bought and sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, most mom. Definitely there's
Yeah.
some monsters out there. But I think, which of course when you're 16 only makes you want to do it more because mom knows nothing, which is totally normal thing to think when you're that age. But when you can see total strangers online saying, this isn't cool, like
Mm.
that does get to you. That does make you start to think. So I mean, I think that it's great. I think that it's never going to go totally away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it'll happen less and less because young women are so much smarter than they
Yeah.
were last generation or the generation before.
Mhm.
And they're so much more feminist. Like,
Yeah.
I did not have any kind of feminist awakening until I was probably 21,
Mm.
something like that, where I started
Yeah.
to look around and read things and
And
talk to
start to challenge
people.
things a bit more. Yeah.
Yes. And I went, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But at 17, I mean, yeah, I wasn't like, oh, my biggest feminine ideal was like girls rule, boys drool. Like there's no
Yeah.
nuance in it at all. And so, yeah, I think that it's really valuable, and there's so much information out there that's easily found, and that's so helpful. But I just wish that these adult men, because like I said, I don't believe that every adult man that gets into a relationship with a younger woman is evil. I don't think
Yeah.
that they're all thinking to themselves, ooh, this is going to
Yeah.
be great. I'm really going to get
Doing
one
the
over on
evil,
her.
the pyramid of evil contemplation. Yeah.
I think that there's something that is wrong with them. I think that there's something that maybe society, society also tells them that that's great, right? Like, oh, a younger woman, that's so sexy. And I think that if they could all just go to therapy, everybody just needs therapy, is my constant refrain in life. Go to therapy, work your shit out before you project it onto some unsuspecting little girl. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that would be great. And I also think at the end of the day, that's not going to be a satisfying relationship for them either. They're eventually going to wake up and turn over and go, this is a person that I don't have a lot to talk about with, that wasn't ready for a relationship that's this serious, because inherently a relationship is more serious if the person is older. So
Yeah.
they now resent me. And it is harmful for them too in certain ways, not
Yeah.
as harmful, but I think that they will eventually, if it's a relationship that they turn into a marriage, if it's someone they eventually have children with, I just don't know how sustainable that is.
Yeah.
So I think that if you are if you're a man listening to this that's actually open to this advice, which I'm sure is few and far between, I would say, yeah, just go talk to somebody, go to therapy, because you're going to be a lot happier finding a partner that's on your same level. That's what's going to make you the most satisfied in life.
Yeah.
And don't tell me that the 20-year-old girl is really smart. Don't do that.
Yeah.
She can be super smart, but she is not on your level. She's not 35 years old, and you need
Yeah.
to find somebody your own age.
Exactly. And it's not just about smarts, it's about life experience as well. And like you were
Yes.
saying, there's somebody just constantly just kind of agreeing with you is not, it's not the way forward for
No,
for yourself at all.
no.
And I mean, I mean, we talked about so many things there, and there are so many. I mean, I don't even know where to start. But like you were saying, it does once again, it's going to fall on women essentially to
Yeah.
to sort this out. Because I mean, especially now with when I was younger, back in the day, we didn't have social media, and when I was younger, so I think God knows, I can't remember how old I was when social media was invented. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. And things like email, AIM, MSN Messenger, all that kind of stuff, they all came about when I was kind of old enough to know a little bit better about these things. But before we had those, if someone was going to ask you out or someone was going to pursue you, they had to call your house, or they had to physically stalk you, or turn up at your school, or meet you in a park, like Jerry Seinfeld. But then now that whole barrier of protection is eliminated.
Totally.
So it's brilliant that there are these conversations happening online that girls can see, because without that barrier, they are just kind of out there for the elements. They are just kind of vulnerable, and yeah, and like ready to essentially be kind of preyed on by these creepy dudes.
Yeah, I mean, you get on like a Tinder and you set your age range to whatever, because you're like, oh, this will be fun, this will be
Yeah.
funny, or I'll meet somebody that's going to buy me dinner, whatever. And then all of a sudden, yeah, like you can totally be preyed on. Like when I see these women that will comment and say, I met my husband when I was 21 and he was 35 and now we have kids together, I think, what, all of the life experiences that you missed because you started dating someone much older, so that you kind of fast forwarded into this family life.
Yeah.
And I just can't, I wouldn't trade my like years of like being poor and like going out to bars with friends for anything. I mean,
No.
that's when you start to form these opinions for yourself. And I just think you're robbed of this super important time.
Yeah.
Everybody
It's
talks
life
about adolescence,
experience.
but yeah, your 20s are like your big time to be like, okay, let me learn how to be an adult for myself.
Yeah,
And nobody can come in
absolutely.
and just teach that to you. Like that's not
No.
how it works.
No, and also like it's a fun time as well. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, and it's like also a time where I feel like there isn't too much jeopardy either
Yeah.
in terms of doing. It's like now is the time to do this stuff before, because when you get older, you can't do those things, and there
No.
will definitely be worse consequences the older you get. So absolutely, like, live it up and really enjoy that time. And
Explore.
and I have friends, even, I mean, some of my friends are in relationships where it's the age gap isn't that huge. People in my family isn't that huge, but because of where that person is in their life, because of where they are in that age, in those age brackets, their life has been pulled into that
Mm-hmm.
section. And so
Mm-hmm.
they have absolutely bypassed a huge chunk of, like, holidays with your friends, living in an apartment with your mates, flat
Yes.
shares, kind of parties in a particular way, you know, what, traveling, and just all these really particular things that you do that are so character building.
Mm-hmm.
They've just been dragged straight into being a wife and being a mum.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not saying they don't have elements of happiness in their life, they absolutely do, but it's
Sure.
always just such a shame, because you can do that without bypassing this. So it's not
Yeah.
about an either or situation. It's actually, no, you're just missing out a bit for no reason. There is
Yeah, I
no
think you
reason to
touched on
bypass it.
something. Yeah, I think you touched on something that was like really important, which is you should be dating somebody that's in the same phase of life as you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about how like once you're older than 25, it's all good. But I think it's also about dating somebody like when I met my fiance, I was 26, he was 32. We were
Mm-hmm.
both done with school. We were both fully like we were working full time. We
Mm-hmm.
were both like living in apartments in the city. Like we were in the same part of our lives, so
Mm.
that when we started dating, it wasn't like one of us was all of a sudden like, oh, now we're like in this adult life. Like you don't want that. Like you want somebody that's doing the same things as you. And eh, I think that an older man maybe wants to pretend to be a young 20 something as well. I think it's a bit of both.
Mm.
And yeah, missing out on those things, or if you're the older partner and you're trying to go and relive your 20s, it's
Yeah.
just equally as like, oh, it's cringy. It's like, why do you want to do that? You had your time. Like
Mm.
live in the moment you're supposed to live in. Don't try to live in the past or the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we touched on Courtney Stodden
Oh
a little
yeah.
bit, and obviously that whole thing was his name Doug. I can't remember what his surname is. It was
Oh yeah, I don't know. I
just fucking
I
loser
funny
Doug.
story about that
Yeah,
guy. I can't remember his last name. It doesn't even matter. But
yeah,
I this during quarantine, my fiance and I rewatched like all of the X-Files.
yeah,
And because what else was there to do?
yeah.
And there was like an episode with like this really creepy monster guy that like sneaks into people's houses through the vents and like
Oh
attacks
my God,
Scully.
the one that stretched himself.
Stretchy fingers
Yeah,
guy, yeah.
yeah.
And that's Doug.
Oh God,
That's Courtney.
of
So
course it
like we watched
is.
the episode, and then my fiance was like, "Do you know who that is?" Like he like couldn't wait to tell me, and I was
Yeah,
like, "Who?" And he was like, "That's the guy that married like the 16-year-old girl." And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, he's
Of
so
course it
creepy and
is.
gross."
Yeah.
Yeah, of course he is. So yeah, that and you know what I think is so interesting. It's really recent. It's come out all this horrible stuff that Chrissy Teigen has been saying about Courtney Stodden.
Yeah, when she was
And
younger. Yeah.
and not to
Yeah.
belittle, I mean, obviously the villain of the story is Doug and Courtney
Yeah.
Stodden's mother. Like,
Mm.
but I think that there's something to be said for the fact that, like, for a long time, the rhetoric was kind of the young women that date these older men are taking the older men away from us women, and we
Mm.
need to belittle them and stuff
Mm.
like that. And like, it's all just like layers and layers of like
Mhm.
patriarchy of like,
Yeah.
don't be mad at the older man that's doing this. Be mad at that little gold digger that's like doing
Yeah.
all this stuff. Like,
Mm.
I was so disappointed when I read that stuff about
Yeah.
Chrissy Teigen, because it's like, oh my God, like you just fell right into it. Like we're just
Yeah.
pitting women against each other. And like this
Exactly.
girl was a victim. Like
Yeah.
that is
She was a
insane.
baby. Well,
Yeah.
I remember I remember very clearly when this whole thing with Courtney and Doug happened. I remember it, and I remember just thinking, this man is disgusting.
Yeah.
And I studied journalism at university, so I fully cannot remember how long ago this was, but I know I was a full adult by this point because I'm older than
Mhm.
Chrissy Teigen. And
Mhm.
then I remember looking at the press and just thinking, my God, this kid has been taken from being a victim to they're acting like she had any agency at
Yeah.
all over anything that's happened here. Like she was like, her mum didn't make a decision, like this wasn't a weird bartering process that happened around her in her childhood. And then because he was fetishizing her so much, then she then become this pinup because he was projecting this stuff on her, and she's getting surgeries and getting more surgeries and then
Ugh.
becoming this pinup, and all her entire childhood was robbed. And I remember seeing, because I remember the stuff happening with Chrissy Teigen, not so much at the time, but I remember it being talked about. Even she's mentioned it over the years and said that she wishes she hadn't done it and everything.
Yeah.
And I know that this time around, people got really, really angry at Chrissy. And I was like, don't get me wrong, what she did was shit. But I was like, everyone was doing it. It was, there was maybe like one person that was famous that wasn't. Every famous person was doing it. Every single newspaper was doing it. Everyone was acting like she is, much like the trope in films where you said, where it has the manic pixie dream girl, blah, blah. Manic pixie dream girl is a little bit less aware of her sexuality, but kind of aware of it. Mm-hmm. But there is a trope in films where there's this young woman, she's just so aware of her sexuality, like American Beauty and all those kind of films. And she's just there ready to take advantage of these poor older men that just don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to live their lives, and these evil little girls. That's kind of that kind of trope. And she ended up almost becoming this villainous character and this pathetic character. And it's like, no, this is a brainwashed child who is going to have long-lasting PTSD, and most really has developed a personality disorder from this kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, I think it's really a good point that you said about how it was like not just Chrissy Teigen doing it.
It was everyone.
Like,
she would have been joining in with the rabble. And I'm not saying it, I'm not excusing it.
Making
exactly.
Jokes and,
everyone, newspaper headlines, everything. It was, I just remember at the time, the saturation and the vitriol against this child. And like you were saying, but some of them would be like, isn't Doug a bit creepy? He's so creepy. Then nothing else is said about him. Don't get me wrong, it did fuck up his acting career. Thank God, because truly this man deserves nothing. He is a trashy dumpster fire of a human.
Absolutely.
And it's just ugh. But
how that trope of like that. The 16-year-old girl that's like, I'm 16. I started my period 3 years ago and I'm here to fuck shit up. Like, are you serious?
Exactly.
What? Yeah, it's just so insane. I mean, I think that like it's a good sign to look and see how much we've grown, in that if you watch like a movie from 4 years ago or 5 years ago, you go, oh, that doesn't really hold up. I think that that's great. But it's also so scary to think about the things that we just all laughed at and said, yep, sure. Yep. She's the one to blame here. She's a little temptress and she's just in it for money. And it's like, what else would she be in it for?
Yeah.
She doesn't want to be
nothing else for her. Exactly. There's nothing else for her. What? Just like his old bum? I don't know. There is nothing else in it for her. And it's like, and I think as well, when people, again, it's like Tavi, that comedian, and she's like, Tavi talks trash, and she kind of talks about their arts. There is no such thing as a gold digger. It's about the fact that there's lots of transactional things happening here, and it's like, well, actually women don't get to earn as much, and they've been taught that they have to go for a man with money because that is their status in society. They couldn't even have a bank account like 10 minutes ago, all that kind of fun stuff. And it's like, truly, people are, when they are talking about this whole thing, when it turns on its head, and when it comes focusing on the younger woman in it, or the girl in it, like, she becomes the villain, and she becomes like all encompassing and responsible for everything that's happened. Like, none of this is transactional. And then when if she wants money, or she has been told, essentially she's in it because she's been told something, and it's like, oh, she's a gold digger, and it's like, so this isn't transactional, he's not getting anything out of this. Like, this is all one-sided,
and he loves her for her personality.
Exactly. This is all one-sided. He's getting nothing out of it. He's not getting to relive parts of his youth. He's not getting to work out his mental health issues on this poor child. It's like, the whole thing is transactional, but unfortunately one person doesn't understand the transaction because they weren't showed the small print.
And they absolutely do. Any older man that meets a younger woman and immediately wines and dines them and buys them jewelry and tries to woo them by going, look at this lifestyle. He knows. He knows what is attractive about him. He knows what this is. It's not just her. And yes, I mean, I think it does have to do a lot with the fact that women are taught, like, you're not going to be able to support yourself. There's no way, babe.
Exactly.
Like, the only thing you can do is look cute and hope somebody rich comes along and finds you charming. Like, that's what it is. And but I love that it's such a thing that no matter how you slice it, we somehow make the woman the villain. Like, it's always that. And it's insane that you can look at a 16-year-old girl and a grown man and go, I don't like her. Like, that is just so, it's insane, laughable. I mean, it's just truly unbelievable. And I think The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, I saw this TikTok recently,
Mm-hmm.
because there's this big thing on TikTok where women will go on and say, "I'm a sugar baby,
Mm.
and I'm able to make all this money, and I don't have to do anything. I just go to dinner with this guy, and then he hands over $1,000." Which,
Yeah.
like, good on you. Like, I
Yeah,
think that that's
absolutely.
great when we
Yeah.
just make it exactly what it is, where it's
Yeah.
like, you want company of a young, pretty girl. I want
Mm-hmm.
money. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
But I think there's also this really harmful thing where women are going online and maybe not telling the whole truth and saying, like, all I have to do is
Mm-hmm.
go to dinner with him. And I think a lot of young women are getting themselves into dangerous situations, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not always going to be like that. Men
It really
are going
isn't.
to expect more from you, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with sex work. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
not prepared for that, if that's not something you're comfortable with, and these people are saying to you, "Oh, all you have to do is go meet them for dinner," and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're in a bad situation, I think that's really dangerous. So I think making these relationships more transparently transactional is totally
Yeah.
fine, but don't go online and say, "I fund my whole life and all I ever do is go to dinner and go on these trips," because
Mm-hmm.
that's really going to be dangerous for some 15-year-old girl that truly believes that. And, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, that's a total aside, but I just saw that
Yeah.
TikTok and I was like, that's such a good point. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to say one thing and then have this girl base her whole life around it, and then she
Mm.
ends up in a situation that could be really dangerous.
Absolutely. And I think as well, thinking about again that whole age, maturity, etc. Some people making these videos are incredibly young, so they haven't hit that point yet where they necessarily have full agency over it. Yeah, brilliant. Make your money. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No one is knocking that. But like you were saying, it's that thing where it's like, let's not idealize this situation that could be dangerous. Unless, of course, you have created a situation that's safe, and you are working maybe within a pillar of safety that you have created or created with other people.
Yeah, like
That's
every
fine.
topic we've discussed, there
Yeah,
are
yeah. There are
times that
nuanced
it really does
variants.
work
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Mm,
but I think that, like, you're going online and you're saying you do not have to have sex with these men, and you
yeah.
don't know
Without
that that's going
context,
to be
you really
true in
don't know
every
that's the case.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time to be alive for sure. I
It
love learning
really
about these little
is.
subcultures, but
Yeah.
I also think about when I one day have children and I,
Mm,
have a teenage daughter, and I'm going to be like, "Oh my God,
yeah.
like, how do you protect them? How do you
Yeah.
do that?"
I mean, I think the main thing is definitely having these, being really open about these kind of conversations and talking about this particular dynamic, because I think it's something that people don't talk about enough as well. And
Yeah.
when I was preparing for this, I spoke to people I knew that had these relationships when they were younger, and I
Yeah.
was like, "How now you're older, now either you're older, you're a mum, whatever else. How do you feel about it now?" And they were like, "To be honest, it didn't not that long after, as I got into my 20s or a certain point, I realized how messed up it was. And now when I
Yeah.
look back at it, I don't understand. We had nothing in common. I don't understand what that person saw in me. And then it actually, when they reflect on it, it creeps them out a lot. And that in itself was quite traumatizing.
Absolutely. I remember specifically. So, ironically, I broke up my boyfriend that I had when I was 17 and he was 21. We broke up for like the last time when at like my 21st birthday party. And I remember realizing very clearly that I was 21 and you couldn't pay me to hang out with a teenager.
Mm.
Because I think the years between 17 and 21, that's a wide gap. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
that is, you do a
absolutely.
lot of growing. And I
Mm.
just remember so clearly being like, I think this guy might be a loser.
Yeah.
Because why was he not hanging out with people his own age? Why was he not dating women his own age? Well, at 21, I don't want to hang out with anybody that's 17 years old. That's so lame. And you couldn't have that moment of like, oh, and you see them in a whole new light that, unfortunately, I think it's almost impossible to see when you're in it.
And I think, yeah, hopefully having more of these conversations amongst themselves will hopefully get them to see the other side of that. And then,
Yeah.
like, before we wrap up, I think there's a really interesting part of this when it's reversed as well, because we
Mm.
don't know, there aren't huge amounts of like kind of looking online, there aren't huge amounts of this kind of thing in reversal in terms of in celebrity land.
Right,
But
right.
we know with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Sam Taylor Johnson, that is particularly messed up, because he was a full-on child and she was older than me when they met. He was a teenager and she was older than me, and
Oh
they've been
God,
together
that's
ever
so
since, and they
gross.
got kids and everything else. So it's one of those things that people kind of like, But I realized that, well, I looked into that and I looked at the different reactions. And even because recently there was a rumor going around that they were getting divorced and everybody was like, finally, Aaron is free.
Mm-hmm.
But then there were a few little things at play here and so many layers. There was one, that's that thing where people were definitely condemning it and saying, yeah, I've always thought this was messed up. This is disgusting. Then
Mm-hmm.
other people, it was like where disgust meets misogyny meets the lack of understanding about boys being exploited. So on one hand it was like, why does he want an older woman? Gross. Then there was another one that was like, why is she going after this child? This is insane. Then there
Yeah.
was another layer of that disgust. It's like, as a woman she shouldn't be doing this. Then there was this other layer of guys of kind of guys saying, well, you know, if an older woman wants to, you know, if I could get to sleep with an older woman, I would. I don't see the problem with it. Ha ha ha, he's not being exploited. There are all these different, like when the roles reversed, it becomes even more complex.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's so interesting. Like, this is why, like, you'll see a lot of these meninist guys online saying, like, well, what about young men that date older women and all this stuff? And like, who's protecting them? And it's like, yes, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
this is also something that feminism takes on, which is
Yes.
this toxic masculinity and this patriarchy that looks at a 16-year-old boy who's dating an older woman and says, oh, good on ya.
Yeah.
Ooh, how
Like it's
sexy.
an achievement. And it's like, no, they are being exploited as well. This person is being abused.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. Totally. But like, that's the other thing. That's the other side of the coin, is that men can never be victims. Like, we can't see men as victims, even when it is absolutely child abuse. And like, that is also a feminist issue, like that men should be able to be seen as vulnerable, as a vulnerable population. And they just aren't. And yeah, it's gross. And like, yes, of course it's less frequent, but it's also still a problem that could be solved by men looking at men as more vulnerable and as victims, and we just don't see them that way as a society. And it's it's messed up. And I think that I think it's funny that the only way that we can really stop it is to go like devalue older women and go, gross, why would you want to be with them? Like, yeah, it's not about that. It's about what, like, come on, that's a child, you know. Thinking of children as children, I think, is something that is really important. And unfortunately, we have all these teen shows where the 16-year-olds are being played by 25-year-olds. And so we're just like, ooh, 16, sexy. But if you talk to an actual 16-year-old, you're like, oh, that's a kid.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
is a kid,
That is a
for
child,
sure.
and they are. And it's a good point as well about in TV shows. I think it's getting better now, because when I was younger, truly 30-year-olds are playing teenagers and 40-year-olds are playing their parents. Hello, the
Yeah.
OC. But then now they are actually getting people that are younger to teen playing them, which is just a revelation that they're at least going for people that are teenage to 24 playing teenagers. That's a really big deal, because that never used to happen before. When I was
Oh, I
younger, that just
know.
wasn't the case really, unless it was like a really kiddie show. But yeah, so
Yeah, unless it was
we'll
on the
see.
Disney Channel, it was like full adults playing
Yes.
teenagers, which
Yeah.
also just kind of slowly warps your mind of like what a
What a
teenager
teenager
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining me today. Where would you like to be found online?
Sure. Thank you. This was so fun. I love ranting about gross older men. So my TikTok is Emily is unemployed, which I really should change to Emily is freelancing. But and my Twitter is Emily ha 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 ha. So you can find me there. And just come on over. I have fun. I make jokes. I'm not an expert, but I definitely make jokes about men. So if you're interested in that, you can find me there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, co-workers, strangers in the street. To find out more about us, including our upcoming events, head over to Instagram, instagram.com/speakon_. Bye!